Many electric typewriters had various kinds of ribbons and correction systems that they can use in the past. The ones that are still being currently manufactured today is known as the correctable carbon film ribbon. So I have an IBM Selectric tool over here, and it contains a carbon film ribbon system, which is usually identified by this orange color spool here, and it uses this dry lift-off tape that is usually represented by this yellow color spool. It has a very unique typing and correction mechanism. So it types very nicely, it produces very crisp and sharp black text, very similar to a laser printer, and also the correction system can lift off the errors very easily, like this. The problem with using correctable carbon film ribbon is that it's not really very suitable for use in making negotiable documents. As you can see from my demonstration, it is pretty easy and quite convenient for me to make a simple erasure or correction in my typing, and the erasure is very clean as well, so it makes it very difficult to trace whether has then be a correction been done on the document. So for instance, if let's say I'm typing a check, for instance, I can easily feed it back into the typewriter and erase the mistakes using the lift-off paper. For this reason, many of the typewriter companies used to release another form of ribbon for use in their electric typewriters. Some of these ribbons are known by various names, such as for IBM, it is known as a Tech 3 ribbon, and for other companies such as Smith Corona or Brother, they call it the Multistrike ribbon. I recently got my hands on one of these Tech 3 ribbons. So as you can tell from the cartridge design, this is one of a very old piece of ribbon that I managed to find. The interesting thing is that the material that they use does not seem to be nylon. This does not feel like a piece of fabric. As a result, you can't really, let's say, put stamp pack ink over it to re-ink it. Another thing is that I noticed that this material tends to be very brittle with age. And since it's been so long since this thing has been opened, the ink has gradually begun to dry up, and it doesn't really print as well. I'll demonstrate it later when I print it out on this machine. With it, you can also pair it with another form of correction, which is known as cover-up correction. Instead of using a sticky formulation to lift off the mistakes, this one uses a bunch of tapes, the ones that are marked in blue, that contains a white color powder. So when you type on it, right, the white color powder sort of transfers onto the paper. So if you make a mistake, the white powder just gets punched onto the paper and the mistake is erased. Similar to how whiteout would be used to erase a mistake when you write something. Over here, I have loaded up the new old stock Tech 3 ribbons and cover-up tape to demonstrate what I mean by degrading in quality. So over here, right, I'm going to type just something simple. As you can see from this demonstration, right, the printout is no longer as black as it's originally supposed to be. So at the top here, you can see, right, the carbon film ribbon produces the perfect black printout. But this Tech 3 ribbon has sort of started to, let's say, in the lack of a better term, dry out. So it starts to print in a more greyish sort of tone. Not only that, I can't really demonstrate it in this video, but if you use it or anyhow meddle with this ribbon over here, right, there's a tendency for it to tear with any slightest sort of snag or tension. The cover-up tape doesn't work as well either. So if I were to try to erase the error, so over here right now, right, it seems to work very well now. But if I were to roll it up, I can actually scratch off the mistake. And because of this, right, all that cover-up tape, the white powder, right, has started to flake off the paper, and it no longer sticks onto the paper very well. Because of the fact that we can no longer find any brand new Tech 3 ribbons that are guaranteed to be in good conditions, or any cover-up tape that's in good conditions, I tried my best to find alternatives to these materials in order to be able to continue to use the properties of these Tech 3 ribbons. So one of the things I discovered is that this Pelican Ultrafilm 410 carbon paper sort of fulfills the properties that a standard Tech 3 ribbon usually has. Now, of course, this varies from typewriters to typewriters because some typewriters use a nylon ribbon, which is very similar to like dot matrix printers, in order to give these multi-strike properties. You can tell because when you touch the ribbon, it feels like a piece of fabric. Those kinds, this solution will not work out. But for ribbons that are manufactured, let's say by IBM or Smith Corona, and sometimes even Brother, they uses this particular film that doesn't really feel like a piece of fabric. This solution seems to work best for now. So the reason why I chose this ultra film carbon paper is that not only does it print in black, but when you rub or touch anything that is written by this carbon paper, right, the carbon paper doesn't smudge as easily. I've seen many different carbon papers that after being used, if you give it enough friction, right, it'll start to smudge everywhere. But for this one, right, if I give it a gentle rub, right, my fingers doesn't really let's see if it can focus. My fingers doesn't really get black as badly as if I were to use the cheaper sort of carbon papers. So what I do is that I usually measure from bottom to top, and the width, right, I measure is around 1.6 centimeters for these IBM Tech 3 cartridges. Now, of course, I've not really experimented with other electronic typewriters, but if I do get the chance to obtain some of their multi-strike cartridges, I'll try again and update. These multi-strike cartridges, I use them because the centerpiece over here, right, as compared to a standard carbon film cartridge, right, this centerpiece helps to reduce the speed of the ribbon so that you can strike the carbon film multiple times, which is allowed because a carbon paper can sort of reabsorb some of the ink and redistribute. So what you do is you cut this into strips in widths that's as wide as your typewriter ribbon, tape them up together. You can do this like so, and then you feed it back into your cartridge as if it was a standard ribbon like this. The cover-up tape replacement was a little bit tricky to figure out. For me at least, right, is that I felt that using correction tape seems to be the more logical solution because correction tape seems to work similarly to cover-up tape. But I had a lot of trouble figuring out which model or which brand to use. In fact, I have experimented, right, with using two different kind of correction tape, both from the same brand, but one is suitable but the other is not. I prefer using this 6mm width. I know that most correction tapes most cover-up tapes used by IBM typewriters or most electronic typewriters are actually 8mm width, but I feel this 6mm width still has some level of coverage that can allow you to cover most of the letters. You will want to find one correction tape, right, that the backing plastic used to hold this correction tape is strong enough such that it can withstand stretching or tearing or pulling by the typewriter mechanism as it does its correction. So as usual, what you can do, right, is that if you take any of these standard correction cover-up tapes, pull out the old tape and re-spool this by rolling this manually back into the supply spool, you can form your own cover-up tape like this. Now, there's nothing special about using a blue spool or a yellow spool, so if you do not have a blue spool, you can just use a yellow spool and do the same thing as well. I personally will use a blue spool because it's just to make it distinct so that I can do some color coding. Alright, so now we have our refilled carbon paper ribbon fed into this machine over here, and we have also replaced the cover-up tape with standard correction tape over here. So if we demonstrate the printout right now, right, PEH, you can see that the printout, right, is darker than what the original Tech 3 ribbon could produce from the new old stock ribbon, but it will not be as black as a standard carbon film ribbon, but it's still legible and it prints out pretty well. So if I demonstrate the correction feature, the correction tape doesn't really go on neatly, but if you want to, you can press it down a little bit and it will be fine. And then after that, if we want to, we can correct it. So over here, right, let me just release the paper and take it out. So over here, right, you can see that if this thing wants to focus, we can see that the printout, right, looks pretty decent. It is not as dark as the standard carbon film ribbon will be, but the correction, right, no longer scrapes out that easily. Of course, with significant effort I can still scrape out the correction, but the tape nevertheless sticks better onto the paper versus the new old stock cover-up tape, which just simply flicks off with just a slightest touch. I guess for these concluding remarks, I feel that using standard carbon paper and correction tape as replacement for Tech 3 or multi-strike ribbons and cover-up tape seems to be a good replacement as of now until better materials can be found. Now, I don't really have any experience using Tech 3 ribbons or cover-up tapes firsthand when they are brand new. So I would like to ask all the typewriter repairmen out there whether is it really feasible to use these carbon films and correction tapes as replacements for such Tech 3 ribbons, whether do they really fulfill the requirements and the quality aspects of it. And I guess I would like to give one last shout out to this channel, which is known as Joe Von Cleef, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. His videos showed me that you can actually replace some of these nylon ribbons, right, with carbon paper, and they will work just as well in terms of use of manual typewriters. It is this video that made me realize that perhaps carbon paper, right, when fed into standard Tech 3 cartridges, can actually still fulfill the requirements and needs of a Tech 3 ribbon. But I'm no expert in this, so I would like to ask what you guys think, whether are these really suitable replacements for such ribbon technologies. I believe that this solution seems to work pretty well, but I do not have hands-on experience using any of the other multi-strike ribbon cartridges that are available, let's say for other machines such as the Smith Corona H series or the Brother Electronic Daisy Wheel typewriters. If I do get my hands on some of these multi-strike cartridges, I'll try to see whether refilling them with carbon film ribbon is even possible in the first place, and to see whether do they work very well in this sort of scenarios or not. So I guess thank you guys for watching this video. So leave any questions or any comments or suggestions in the comments down below, and I guess I'll see you guys next time.